If you follow me on LinkedIn, you might have seen me post about this, which is how I used C# scripts to make SVGs inside of Power BI to make these awesome looking KPI cards. But today I wanted to show you how you can make these kind of things inside of Power BI with native visuals only. All of these are one visual each, there's no overlapping, and really honestly pretty easy to make. If you like things like this, I really recommend checking out my Power BI bar chart tutorial. It goes through how you can use native visuals to make all of these different kinds of bar charts. And if you'd like to follow along and make this along with me, you can go to my GitHub and all of the links will be in the description where you'll be able to download a native KPI chart starter file, which I'll upload in a moment. And that will have all of the data as well as all of the measures. And with that, let's jump right into it. And this is how you make 18 native KPI designs. Now, credit where credit is due. Andy actually made this inside of Tableau, it's like way back when, and Nicholas already actually made this inside of Power BI, but I wanted to do, it's like all of these myself, and I have used slightly different methods than both of them in any case. So I'm going to just start with this and we will build this for you. When you actually open up the starter file, what it's going to have is it's just going to have these three different items. So we're going to actually just remove all of this and we'll start over. So I'm going to just show you exactly how everything is done. So let's start with the most basic one, which is a KPI card. So let's try to just build a KPI card. We're going to click the KPI card new, just set this right in here. And the KPI card is going to use only a couple of different things. So the first thing is, of course, it's going to be the current year. And while we're here, let's just go in and look at the data as well as the measures. I'll start explaining the measures, but we'll kind of go through them as we use them instead of going through all of the measures all at once, because maybe that's a little bit too much. The data that we're going to be using is pigeon waist data. And realistically, we don't need all of this additional data that you see here, like longitude and latitude, but it's essentially looking at waist data that's been called in for, I believe, the New York, it's like city. And every time the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene has some kind of unsanitary pigeon condition complaint, they've logged it, they've created a specific time for it. And because of that, we can just use the created date as well as the number of incidents to create a little bit of information about how they're doing with their, it's like peak and lowest moments. How does it compare to the previous year and things like that? So that's what we're going to be looking at. And the main thing that we're looking at here is, of course, the current year value. The current year value is literally going to be counting the unique keys of the pigeon waist. So if we just put that current year versus, let's say, the month number, then you can, okay, maybe not the month number, by the month, then you can see this is how many, it's like incidents were reported for each individual month. Very, very simple. And that's kind of the metric that we're looking at. We also have past year, and the past year is just the current year with the same period last year with a date table. The date table is actually being created using the Bravo external tool, but we're not really going to go into that except for the fact that this is basically just connected by the created date one from date to date. And we've got a nice working dates table. Now, inside of this dates table, so we've got this current year, and then we have the actual current year as text. So we're just selecting, it's like the current year, and we have this as text as well in case we need to use it in other places. It's going to be important later, but we've got the current year number. So we have the actual number that's being used, and we want to place that here. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to look at the title, turn that on, and inside of the title, we have this conditional formatting. This allows us to use an actual measure such as this current year number. And once we do that, you can see 2022 current year, that's the value we're using. Now, that's one way to do it with the title, and that's going to be important later. But another way to do it is you can simply, it's like put in multiple values. For example, current year, it's like number can be placed in. So inside of this actual KPI card, you could technically have them on, it's like next to each other or side by side. But another way you can do it is that you can make the label a specific value. So when we're in the, it's like KPI card and we're looking at the callout values, we can click on the callout values. And if you select the series to be the current year, you can set not the values, but the heading to be a value as well. And by selecting current year number, we've got the label to be 2022. This way, you don't necessarily have to include it inside of the title. It's still inside of the box. And one additional thing that we have is the year over year percentage. And this is basically just calculating what is the current year subtracted by past year divided by past year. So how much has it increased or decreased in percentage by last year? You can see that the format is in percents. And with this year over year, it's like percentage, what we can do is we can create this past year subtitle text. First, we're going to format the, a year over year percentage that we just created to have just one decimal place, as well as if it's positive, it'll have a little plus icon. If it's negative, it'll have a negative, it's like symbol in front versus the, it's like selected year -1. So looking at this, what information does this give you? In 2022, there were 887 pigeon waste incidents, which is a 12.7% increase against 2021. So with the past year subtitle text, which is literally just this text showing up, we can put this in here by going to the reference labels for the current year, and then we'll put in this past year subtitle text. Now, this is a pretty good way to sort everything out, and to simply make it look like this, we can just turn off the background, make the divider completely transparent, and the value itself, we can change the color. The color, we have something here, the bar color. If the delta, so if the current year is minus past year is greater than 0, it can be, it's like either green or it can be blue. Now, obviously green for some people might mean something positive, and having more waste than last year is probably something negative. So you can change the colors around if you want. But for now, if we go, and we're still in the KPI card visual, inside of the reference labels with the series selected, if we go to the value and the color, and we set the format style to be a field value and go into bar color. So just look at color. Then you can see that this text has now, it's like changed to green. We can turn off the title for this reference label to get this subtitle text part out. And finally, once all of that's done, that's basically most of what you want to do. You just need to play with, it's like if you select all series, you can kind of go out and click on the layout and make it center aligned, for example. You can go to the callout values and do the same, make it center aligned, and that's pretty good enough. If you want to make it like more centered, you can do things like with the series, you have to make sure all is selected in order to change the layout, but you can see that the vertical alignment, it's like can be something that's used, and then the callout size is also something that can be used in order to shift things around a little bit. So just play with these different, it's like settings, and you should be able to get the perfect look that you want. This is kind of what I've gone for. It's the middle part. And now I'm going to remove this because it's just the exact same thing. The next one that we're going to make is this one right here. Now, this one is actually, it's like we're not going to be using the KPI card anymore, the card visual, specifically because all of these different visuals are using a simple trick with the title and subtitle to show these two values. What I mean by that is, okay, so this is a line chart. So let's start with that. We've got a nice line chart here, and can just get rid of this one. Got a lovely line chart here. And this line chart is going to show current year in the y-axis, and in the x-axis, of course, you can put something like month. Now, this is not my favorite way to do things, because if you put in month, then you can see that, because it takes a little bit too much space, it's, kind of, it just doesn't look super nice when it's like this. Of course, it still works, but it's just not my favorite way of showing things. So what I like to do is there is a column that I've created here. This is actually something that I found on LinkedIn, and I'll try to link the actual post in the description of this video. But one of the problems that you have with just taking the month and taking the first letter of each month is that January, July, and June, these are all J's. And because of that, it's really hard to get them ordered correctly. So you can actually use a unique character in order to make them distinct. And by making them distinct, you can give them a specific order. So now we have the month letter. And if you use that month letter, then it looks a lot cleaner, especially when you're going to be using it for KPI cards. Now, let's take a look at what it should look like. We can just have these side by side. I think that's completely fine. Let's just move this here, kind of zoom in. Okay, now this is what we're trying to make. And this is what we're working with. And yeah, okay, let's just move this here for now. It's totally fine. First, what we want to do is we want to show these actual values. And you do that by using the title. So in the title, we're going to click on this conditional formatting number. And what we're going to do is first, we're going to try to see if we can just put in current year. Now you can actually see just selecting current year does not work. And the reason for that is because the current year is a numerical value. And because it's a numerical value, you can't place it into a title. Weird, but there we go. We've got the current year text, which I just showed you. And this current year text basically is formatting the current year into a text value. And because of that, it goes in no problem. 887, perfect. Let's make it center aligned. And then we're going to go in and take a look at the subtitle. Maybe let's change this to Segue UI. Make this size 20, a little bit bigger, more like a KPI card. Turn on the subtitle. And inside of the subtitle, what we're going to do is we're going to take that past year subtitle text and put it inside the actual value. So if we find this past year subtitle text, excuse me, we're going to just turn that on. And you can see it's, it's working perfectly. We've got the text color and we're going to use the same bar color that we've created. And that's going to work just fine. And you can see that that's kind of already, it's like close to what we want. Now, let's start formatting the line in order to get this look. First, we're going to turn the grid lines off. And then we're going to go to our y-axis. The y-axis values we actually don't need at this time because you can see that we've got a high and midpoint, and those kind of act as our, it's like visual elements, letting us know how large these values are. And because of that, what we're going to do is we're just going to turn off the y-axis, and for the x-axis, we're going to turn off the title. There, we're decluttering the visual because as a KPI card, it needs to be as simple as possible for people to read. And that looks pretty good. Let's go to the lines. And for the, for this series, what we're going to do is we're going to make the width a 1 pixel size, and we're going to make the color black. Very simple, very nice. But how do we get the top and the bottom values? We actually need specific helper measures here. So we've got the max current value, and this max current value might seem like quite a lot, but essentially what we're doing is we're summarizing the date month number, and the date month letter. Month number and month letter need to be there because we're ordering the month letter by the month number. And we're trying to find out what's the highest value for, the current year within this table. And if the current year is the same as the highest value, then we're going to show the current value. Otherwise, it's going to be blank. Essentially, the logic behind it is what's the highest value? And if that highest value is, the same as the line that you're on right now, then show that value. Otherwise, don't show anything. So we take the max current value and throw it into the line axis. And that has essentially become our maximum point. We do the same thing for minimum points, and we've got, basically just the exact same logic, but instead of maximum of x, max x, which is iterating across this table that we create, we're going to use min x, and that is going to give us the lowest value. So now we've got the highest value and the lowest value, as well as the current value line. We're going to go and make sure that the legend is turned off because we simply don't need that. And we're going to open lines again so that when we click on the series, we can select the max current value, make sure that's black, and the min current value is also black. Now you can choose to make these like red and green if you want. I know some people, like to do that in order to show minimum and maximum values, but for now we're just going to make them black. And the final touch to add these labels, we go into data labels, turn them on, go to the series for current year, we'll turn them off for that. And there you have it. So now we have data labels only for the maximum and the minimum point. One thing that you'll also realize is that inside of your tooltips, you do have these, different values that show current year, current value. And one thing that you can do is you can just put in the month value into the tooltip, for example, so that you'll see that what month it is. But in my opinion, you can also just go into properties, tooltips, background, make it 100% transparent, because this is technically a KPI card, so you don't really need tooltips on. for this, in my opinion. So this is completely fine. The last thing that you can do is inside of the visual. If you go into size and style, you see that this, it's like number is kind of like glued to the top. If you want to push that down a little bit, you can use the padding. And in size and style, going to the padding, setting the padding to be something like 20. You can see that it goes down a little bit more. It's more centered and, it's like as a KPI card should be. And that basically will be what we do here. Okay, I'm just doing that to make sure that it's sized the same. Just place that right here. So that's our first KPI card. And it really is, going to be very similar to how we do things from now on. So we've got this card, and what we're going to do next is we're going to make this card. So let's paste it out here. Now, this card is going to be pretty similar. And what I'm going to do in a lot of cases, what I did before in my bar chart video was I was just copying and pasting things. But I think this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to build things from scratch, but I'm going to be more liberal with formatting Painter. So for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to select the stacked column chart. Doesn't really matter which column chart you make. And let me just make sure that it's the right size. We'll place that there. And what we're going to do is, you know what? Maybe I will just copy and paste it. And, it's like, I think that's okay because we have to put in the title and the subtitle and format it every single time. And I think it's okay not to do that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this and then we're going to change the visual style to stacked column chart. Once the stacked column chart is there, we still have the month letter in the x-axis, and we're going to put in the current year, simply this measure, into the y-axis. That looks pretty good already, but what we're going to do is here, we actually don't have any figures, so we want to bring the y-axis back, at least the values, and we want to turn off the data labels. That looks much cleaner. And for the colors, we're just going to the columns, selecting conditional formatting, clicking on the field value, and we'll just look for that bar color we already have. And there we go. Very, very nice and clean. And if you'd like to make the bars a little bit thinner, what you can do is go into your columns, go into your layout, and increase the space between categories. And this way, it's like you can actually, what this setting is doing is the space between the J and the F, it's making that larger or smaller, and therefore making this, it's like larger or smaller. Really easy to do. And considering this is all one visual, it's also quite nice and a little bit faster and unless than if you had maybe multiple different measures going on. Okay, so next one we're going to make is this. And this here, this is a, it's like nice little visual where you can see that it has almost everything the same as this visual, the first one that we made. But the main difference is that now we have a light gray or a lighter gray line, which represents the past year. Now, if you want to make something like this, we've already got the current year, the max value, and the minimum value. And the only things you really need to add are the past year, the maximum past year value, and the minimum past year value. All of these, it's like are pretty much the same. The past year is just calculating, it's like current year, same period last year because we have a nice dates table. And then the max past year value is, of course, instead of the current year value, we're just changing that to past year, and it works exactly the same. So we have this, and what we need to do is sort out our data labels, where in the past year, we're going to turn this off. And of course, color is interesting because the color is how we're showing that, the black is the current year and the other color is the past year. In this circumstance, it might be better to have a legend, but if you try to turn the legend on, then it'll show all of these additional measures, and you don't really want that. So it's just easier to go into past year and make it a more transparent gray. And it's because it's not as prominent, it's more, it's like indicative that that's what it is, that it's the past year value. But if you want to do something like this, then you have to be more careful. You have to explain to your end users somewhere that the gray represents past year. And, it's like usually that's something that I might add as, it's like just a label over the whole thing and not just inside of the KPI cards. But, that's really up to you. Maybe that gray was a little bit too light, but I think it's fine. The next card we're going to make is this area chart. That is the next one. Yeah. This area chart here is essentially going to be very, very similar to what we created before. And we're just going to copy this one again. And the reason that we're, it's like using an area chart is so that the this gray area in the background represents the past year, and this black line represents the current year. It's like a little bit of a different way to show current year versus past year. But for this one, we're going to take away the minimum and maximum values. We're going to still turn off the data labels for this one. And we're going to add another it's like measure. And basically what this is using is it's exactly the same as the max and the minimum current year values that we've used, except the value that we're looking at, instead of being the maximum iterator, we're simply taking the last non-blank value. So for the last month, just give us, it's like this value, and it works really well. So if I throw that in there, you can see that it's shown up. And for the data labels, turn it on and see that works really nicely. Let's also just make sure that the last month value color is black and not, it's like navy. And one final thing to do is we've got the past year value. We throw that into our y-axis as well. We want to make sure that the data labels is turned off for this past year. And then we turn on the shade area. Now, for the shade area, you can actually go in and select which one you want to show it for. So for the current year, we turn the shade area off because we just want that to be one line. And for the last month value, it's also better to turn this off because that's just 1 point, but it just doesn't need like a shade area because that's still part of this line. And then the past year, now you can set this to be match line color, which means that if you have a specific color inside of the line, then it will match that and it'll be, very similar to that. Very good practice to do because they essentially show the same thing. But if you want to make it gray, this works really nicely. And if you want to have kind of this effect where it doesn't necessarily have a line, you can make the line transparent, but the area still works. And this is a really nice way to, it's like show this value as well. How are you doing this year versus last year? And it's not too intrusive. And one of the good and important, it's like things to keep in mind is that you don't want to clutter the image too much, because the more cluttered it is, the harder it is for your end users to absorb that information. And you want to make that as easy as possible. I think that's one of the main things that we're trying to do as Power BI developers. And okay, let's keep going. This one is going to be a bar chart and the line chart together. And you can kind of see that this is based around, so we're going to start with the stacked column chart here. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this from a stacked column chart to a line and clustered column chart. So I've done that first. And for the columns, we're just going to turn the color off and make that nice gray. Make sure that the y-axis is turned on because there's no data labels to really show you what's going on here. And we're going to go and take the past year, put that into our line axis. Make sure you do really want to make sure that the line is also nicely formatted, because otherwise it can, doesn't look so great. And I think I've made a mistake here. I think current year should be the line and the past year should be the columns. And let's just go and make sure that the line is black. You can, if you feel like the 1 pixel is too thin, you can make the pixel, it's like more increase the pixel width to make it more prominent, but that's really up to you. But you can see that this is honestly very easy to make. Like this is 1, 2, 3, it's like different DAX calculations, as well as, however many calculations you need for the title, which is not so many. All right, moving onwards, we are going to make the next one here. And this one's really interesting because it's essentially following the same logic as this one. So this one is the one we're going to duplicate. It doesn't need to be a line and clustered column chart. So I'm going to revert back to the stacked column chart because we don't need 2 different values. But what we're using here is, okay, the bar needs to be the past year, and the black line that you see, the inner bars, represent the current year. So what we can do is we can scroll all the way down inside of our format, go to our error bars, turn them on for the series past year, and then we'll just put in the current year value as the upper bound. One thing that you'll see is that this error bar, because it's going to the past year, starts from the past year. That's not necessarily what we want. So we have a helper measure, _0. _0 indicates that it's just a 0 value. So if I put that at the lower bound, the error bar will start from the base, go all the way to however high it needs to be. That suits me very, very nicely. And we'll go and format the error bar, make sure the bar width is something like a 10, for example. And if you want, you can have the border, and you can see that with the border set as a 1 pixel, it does almost look like it's rounded, but generally that's not what I want to go for. So I'll set the border size to be 0 and the bar width to be something like 8 or 7 even. Make this color black, and then I'll turn off the markers, because if you keep the markers on there, it actually comes out of the sides a little bit. And I think this looks very nice, and there's not much I would change with that, because the black represents the current year and the gray represents the past year. Okay, so we're gonna continue onwards, and let me just fix that mic. The next one that we're gonna make is going to be this one, and this one's a little bit interesting because on the surface, it looks like it's the exact same as this value, as this, right? It just looks like you're just conditionally formatting it in order to, to give those error bars some life. But unfortunately, it's not so easy, because the error bars do not, in fact, have a conditional formatting option for the bar color. If it did, we could just simply use the bar color and, it's like throw that in there. But unfortunately for us, that is not an option. So how do we go about doing this? Well, the easiest way to actually do it is this, where here I have, it's like some additional 0 values. So I'm going to throw 2 of these in here. And okay, let's just make sure we turn off the options first. And we're going to make this into a clustered column chart. Then we're going to throw in 2 separate metrics. I think we can get by with only having the 1, possibly. Let me just double check. Yeah, I think we can get by with just having the 1. But if we want to have 1 like this, what we need to do is we need to go into our columns, go into our layout, and turn the overlap on and make the overlap 100%. Essentially, what that's doing is there is a bar here that is 0 in height, so they're basically just overlapping, and that will allow us to make essentially a bar. It's like that will show us the current year. It's like in error bars, and we'll be able to have 2 different error bars, but they'll essentially be overlapping each other, and that works really nicely. The past year, we're going to make, it's like gray just again, but in the error bars themselves, we're going to go and we're going to turn on this. Now, the lower bound can always be 0. That's fine. But the current year value always shows up. So instead of having the current year value show up, how about we show the current year only if we have the delta be negative? So the delta, as you will remember, is the current year minus the past year. So if the delta, negative delta current year, what this is going to show is if delta is negative, if the past year is greater than the current year, then it will show a specific value. So you can see that I put negative delta current year in here, only shows error bars where it's lower than, it's like the actual bar. For the 0, it's a column that we've added here, we're basically just using this as a standalone free space. And that free space is going to have a 0 at the lower bound and a positive delta bar for the upper bound. We do need to enable this to see it. We do need to make sure that the width and stuff is matched, but we can also change those colors so that it looks exactly like this. So when it's positive, when the past year is greater than the current, when the past year is less than the current year, we make it, it's like blue, and otherwise we can make the bar color green, for example. And yes, you can, make those look exactly alike if you, go into the bar color, get those hex codes out and throw them in. I'm not going to do that, but this is exactly how it works. And this actually works in a dynamic way as well. The problem is that, of course, it's like even if you do change the, it's like measures around, you are using multiple, it's like helper measures in order to get there, and you won't need to in the future when they make the error bars, when they give them the ability to be conditionally formatted. Okay, so now the next one we're going to create is this. Now this is, pretty honestly even more straightforward than what we just made, and we could even start with, let's say, this one here. We'll copy that and paste that, because that's essentially I think the one that's closest to it. The only thing that we're showing here really is the past year value. So we've got the current year value. It is conditionally formatted. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our error bars for the current year, turn them on, past year upper bound, past year lower bound. That creates a nice little marker here. If we turn off the markers, go to the bar, make the width a size 10, make the bar color black, and the border size and the border color black as well. This essentially is that nice look. You can make it a little thicker by changing the border size. And this, I think, in my opinion, works really great. It shows you what the past year value is and what the current year value is. But you can also see that because the colors are black for the past year, it doesn't actually align with the other visuals. So yet again, if you want to be more consistent, you might want to make, it's like the actual, error bars gray. But if they're light gray like this, they're harder to see. So, no matter which direction you decide to go, you need to be aware that you want to have consistent coloring so that if gray is how you're showing past year, then it should be gray here as well. But obviously that's a problem because it's harder to see. So you just have to figure out how you want to make your color coding consistent. Okay, let's take a look at this one. This one is honestly, if you take a quick look at what we just created, this one here, it's very, very similar. And, it's like honestly not so much that we need to change in order to get here. You'll see that the lines are a little bit thinner, and we're just going to the columns and making that layout space between categories a little bit larger to make the lines a little bit thinner. But also, if you go into your error bars, you can turn on your markers and make that markers a size 10. That's the maximum size for the markers, and that gives them a little bit more oomph. So you can see that it's a little bit, it's like more visible. If, of course, you don't want them to be as thick, you can make the border size smaller, and that'll make them a little bit thinner. It's a couple of different settings that you have to play with, but they work just fine. The next KPI we're going to make is this one, and this is the simplest one, but I think it's, it's like worth just showing you how to make it. So let's take this visual, for example, and, remember, we're just copying and pasting it for that title to stay here, but we'll change this into, doesn't matter, stacked bar chart, clustered bar chart, really doesn't matter. We're going to take off the y-axis. We're going to, it's like take off the max and min current year. And what we're going to do is inside of the bars, we can color it and make sure that it's colored using the bar color measure that we've created. Is that right? And then in the error bars, we turn it on and we put in the past year. And, so you've got that there. Maybe turn the data label off. And inside of our error bar, you might want to make the, it's like marker a little as big as possible because it's like a little bit hard to see. Right now we're making it black and that will make it invisible, but we're going to go to the bar and just make sure that it's working properly because right now that color is only showing up as black and that is not necessarily what we want. Sometimes, it's like things like this do happen. You just need to make sure that that might simply be because the line was set to black, and even though we're changing the color now, it's not letting us really do that. So the current here, we're, it's like going to change it around a little bit, and you can only get the color to go on if another value is selected. And now, hopefully, this conditional formatting is going to work. Okay, so unfortunately, we can't tell if the conditional formatting is working because past year is always less. Oh, I actually think it's not working because you can see that the conditional formatted blue is a different color to this. So let me just double check. The bar color, if the current year is less than the past year, or if the current year is greater than the past year, show this blue color, otherwise show this color. That's essentially what it should be. But let me just try making this again. Sometimes these things do happen where, like you have a color and it just isn't going to, it's like work with you because you've already changed some settings as a different visual, but hopefully, it may also simply be that it's just not going to cooperate with us, which, it's like can happen. And, it's like in that case, what I would do is I would just make this a gray, like I think it's completely fine. But you can see, for example, like this one, even though I'm changing the color, it's not cooperating with us. And I guess these things do happen, right? Like here we can change that color and, it's like what I'd advise you in this circumstance is that this bug specifically happens because we set colors as a different visual and changed it to a different visual. So just something for you to know. I was considering, it's like taking this one out, but I think it's worth showing you, it's like how some errors can occur. Now, this one's one that I'm really excited to show you because this is a bullet chart, but it's sideways. And if you make it larger, you'll actually see there is a line, there is a value for every single, it's like metric or, month. But the more you squeeze it, like it will try to, it's like squeeze together, and it still works even though things are very much, it's like right next to each other. And this is one that I'm going to show you kind of how to make from scratch. We're going to get rid of all of these and we're going to get rid of the month letter. But this visual, it is actually a clustered bar chart. And that's what we're going to start with. So we're going to change this into a clustered bar chart. And we're going to throw in the month letter into the y-axis and current year into the x-axis. Now, the only reason that I'm showing you this is because if you wanted to just throw in the month letter, it actually doesn't work properly. Like you can see that this is, unfortunately, just not giving us this kind of, how do you say, this size, it's like not having things be cramped right next to each other. And the reason for that is actually very simple. It's because the month number is categorical. What I mean by that is that the data type, if you're in, it's like J, then it's very much a hard J, and it needs to be a continuous y-axis. And what I mean by that is it basically just needs to be a number. So if you have the, it's like y-axis be a number, then it can become as small as you want. Like, it's like that still works, even though they're very much compressed against each other. And it works because they're numbers. And, it's like the y-axis doesn't need a space for all of them. Here, this still kind of, is a little bit confusing because it doesn't show all of the months, but you make it a little bit bigger and you will see all of those months. So I think it still kind of works, it's like just fine. But then how do you actually get this to work? How do you get the, it's like values to show? And the magic here is that we need to do a couple of different settings. So we're going to get rid of the current year and we're going to put in 0. And we're going to put in 0 4 times. So you see that I've got, multiple different, it's like versions of 0. Doesn't matter why I've called them C1 or V2. 4 different versions of 0. Oh, excuse me. 4 different versions of 0. And the next thing that we want to do is make the y-axis inverted. It needs to start from January and go downwards, not go from January to December upwards. So inverted, make sure that the type is continuous. And you can see that if I make it categorical, then it tries to show everything, but we want the type to be continuous. This option only shows up if the number, if the y-axis is a number. So just be warned, that's why it might not have worked for you before. So we set that up, and now we're going to turn the values off. And this is the secret. Like very, very clearly, the data label here for series, it's like _0. Instead of putting the value as a 0, what we're going to do is we're going to change this field to be the month letter. And there you have it. There you have a y-axis that works really well. You still see some zeros in there, and we do have to fix that. And the reason that's happening is because we need to turn off the data labels for all of the other zeros. And now those are turned off. And here we have, it's like January, February, March, April, it's like, etc. And it works. For some reason, August isn't showing up just yet. That's fine. Like once we put in some values, it will show up. You can see that August does show up here. All right, so let's keep going. So we have these 4 different items. Why do we have 4? Well, the reason that we have all of these 4 items is because there is no clustered bar chart with a line. So if we want to make different, so let's take a closer look at this. This essentially, the gray is showing the past year. The black is showing the current year. If it's blue, it means the, it's a current year is above the past year. If it's green, current year is less than the past year. So that's essentially how it's color coded, but those are essentially 4 different elements. We have the gray, the black, the blue, and the green, and all of those need to be different error bars. And that's kind of why that's the case. So for the bars, make sure that the overlap is 100%, and it's like that needs to happen because they basically do need to overlap. And then what we are going to start off with is in the error bars for 0, that's going to be our past year. We'll turn that on, and we basically just need to make sure that the bar is a nice, it's like dot, and we'll make the bar color gray, maybe slightly more visible gray. For series V2, doesn't really matter. Current year, make sure that it's enabled. Make sure the bar color is black and the marker shape is a black dot. Nice. For C1, that's the line. What we want to do is we want to show the, it's like past year and current year simply based on whether it exists or whether it doesn't exist. So we have these other measures. If the delta is underscore 0, then show the current year, and we're going to be using that. So we've got the current year and the past year. So we're going to put a negative delta current year, negative delta past year, enable that, and it only shows lines for when it's negative, right? So when the past year is greater than the current year. So we make this bar color green and we turn the markers off. One thing that's useful for you to know is that the order of which these, it's like values are on this build well makes a difference. So let's take a closer look. So you can see that this is what it looks like after I've moved them. But if I move them back up here, hang on, this one. Okay, before I did that, you can actually see that when I'm moving these things around, it actually makes a difference which one is on top. So you usually want the current year, I think that's V2, to be on top. And then you want 0, which is the past year, to be, it's like just below that. And the lines to be at the very bottom. Because if the lines are at the top, sometimes they can be, it's like kind of over the dots and it doesn't look as good. So got this one here for C1, and for C2, we turn that on. Positive delta current year, positive delta past year, make this a nice blue. And that is everything. Of course, there's no way around the fact that you can't show, it's like all of these at the same time, unless you want to make it categorical and just have it be, it's like a very, very large, it's like visual. Like even here, you can see that, it's like it doesn't show up unless you go all the way. If you want to make that a little bit easier, I think one thing that you can do is inside of the values, or was it values? If you set the values to be categorical, you can set a maximum width. And if you set that width to be as small as possible, go back to continuous, turn off the values, then you can have it show up like faster. Like you can see there's a less amount of space required, but you can also see that even if you squish all of them together, like it might show January, July, December. It's not perfect, but it will still work. Okay, so that was yeah, this one is, I really like that you can do this, but I don't like that you have to have 4 measures that are equal to 0 to make this happen. So I don't 100% recommend it to everyone, but it can be very useful. So let's make it horizontally now instead of vertically now instead of horizontally. And when you're making it horizontally, it's actually much easier to do. We're gonna actually copy this one, and this one here is going to be this, just place it right here. So this one is a line and clustered column chart, and we're using a line and clustered column because we actually don't need that many things. So one thing that you can do is that inside of the lines, you make the lines 100% transparent. In going into the color, make them 100% transparent, but you turn the markers on. Show for all categories. So we've got the current year, and we're going to find the past year, and we're going to turn the past year on as well, and make sure that inside of the lines for the past year, the color is light gray, and then you've got current year and past year. And all you need to do is just turn on the error bars where for either one of them, it doesn't matter. For the past year, upper bound is current year negative, right? And that's going to be the one, it's like the green. So the bar color turns green. Make sure the markers are off, and that is where the past year is above the, it's like current year. Excuse me again. And for the current year, the lower bound or the upper bound is going to be positive delta past year. Turn that on. And then for all of the other ones, we've got a nice blue color. So that works really nicely. And you might just want to fiddle with the width to make it a little bit more prominent and easier to see. And of course, you can do that to this one as well. So now you've got these, it's like lovely, it's like dumbbell charts, which is all natural, I guess. That's the best way of putting it. And what we can do with this dumbbell chart is to reuse it and make this kind of chart. And as you can see, we're honestly most of the way there already, but take a quick look. So we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it here. And the reason we're doing that is because we don't even need to do all that much. Here you can kind of see that we could technically just make all of this into error bars. And I think that's the it's like method that I've used here, because for the past year and the current year, you actually want the colors to be different. And it might seem like a very easy way to just, it's like use the colors to do all of that, but it's actually going to be better if we just do this. We'll put in a 0 and another 0. So we've got 2 zeros in here. It's like 2 measures that represent zeros. And for the error bars, we're going to turn them on. And we've got this negative delta current year, negative delta past year. And we'll make the bar color green, make the bar color a 10, width a 10. Border size will turn off, and the markers will make into circles. Now, you'll actually see here, this essentially doesn't work perfectly, but it does make rounded it's like bars. It's hard to see because it's off at the moment, but if you wait just 1 sec and we'll put in the positive values here, enable them, then you can see that they're all visible now. Just make sure the width is a 10, border size is 0, excuse me, marker shape is blue, a circle and blue. And you can kind of see that it doesn't look exactly perfect to be rounded. So I think you need to make the width like an 8 or a 9 or something. And then it'll look a little bit more, it's like nice and blobby. Blobby is not a word. I don't know. So 9. And then this works, quite nicely and not much to it. Okay, so this next one here, this one is kind of annoying, but this actually is 2 different visuals. Like this is the only one that is actually 2 different visuals, and it's kind of necessary for it to be 2 different visuals because the title you can really only put at the top. So it's like that didn't really make sense for it's like this specific visual. But let's go here. So what we're doing with that one, we're just going to copy this title and kind of squish it in the corner here. And the other one that we're going to use is simply just the stacked column chart. So we'll take that here. We're going to turn the title off because we're not using that anymore. And this is kind of where we start to cheat a little bit. And, it's like I say that lightly because what we're going to do is you see this visual here. We're going to start formatting it so that at the bottom you can see green dots when it's green. And we're going to move the x-axis to the top. Now, in order to move the x-axis to the top, we've got the visual specific measures. And inside of here, what we're going to do is dot bar positive, we're going to put that here. And the dot bar negative, we're going to put that just here. So what that has done is it's created a little bit of additional bars. Dot bar positive, is that working for me? Should just giving us the same values. Okay, that's a little bit strange because if we're looking at this one, month letter, dot bar positive, dot bar negative, positive delta, negative delta. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. So here we have, it's like dot bar negative, dot bar positive, and those are, it's like fine and dandy, but we also need to have, it's like current year can't just be current year. We need to change that into positive delta current year, as well as negative delta current year. And the reason for that, we'll make sure dot bar positive is above. The reason for that is simply because, let me see, inside of the columns, the bars, if you have multiple different bars, you cannot change the color. Additionally, it shouldn't be a stacked column chart. It should be a clustered column chart. And with the clustered column chart, we need to also make sure that the columns are all overlapping. And let's see. And this is actually fine. What we're going to do is for the dot bar positive, we're going to make it 100% transparent. For the dot bar negative, we're also going to make this 100% transparent. These different values, dot bar negative and positive, are going to basically find what is the max value of the current year and multiply that by 0.2, and it'll give us a little bit of space here for the negative, and for the positive it's 1.2, so just above. The reason that we're going to do that is because we can now turn off the x-axis values, and with the x-axis we can simply go into our data labels, turn our data labels on, and for the dot bar negative, for that value, we can put in, you may have guessed it already, the month letter. Once we put in that month letter, make sure that the color, make sure that you change the color. Sometimes if you don't change the color, you might not see it. That is just the x-axis. We're actually not going to put that here. What we're going to do is we're going to put the dot bar dot. So if the delta is greater than 0, put a green circle, otherwise don't. This green circle is literally, if you hit your Windows key and your semicolon, then you will be able to just get your emojis out. And inside of your emojis, if you click your actual emojis, click the heart, and you scroll down, there are a whole bunch of different circles with different colors. So you can actually use that. I'm using this green one right here, green circle. So this dot bar dot, I'm going to put it in here. And so for these ones that are green, or once I'll color them, it'll be green, are actually showing specific values. That's how you get that to work. So for the positive delta current year and the negative delta current year, we turn those labels off and make sure that for the dot bar positive, for that value, we're going to put that month letter in there. And once we put that month letter in there, the x-axis is essentially at the top now instead of at the bottom. A couple of different steps that you need to take in order to get here, but it still works really nicely. And for the columns, let's just make sure that's the positive delta here, that's going to be blue, and the negative delta current year is going to be green, and it just works perfectly. Of course, you can go around and, it's like change the different settings to make sure that everything works exactly as you intend to do it. It might be that I've switched the colors around because I can see that's green and blue. Doesn't matter. Probably you're not going to have all of these different measures inside of your report at the same time, or at least I hope you don't. Okay. So for native SVGs, we've got 3 more. So this one here is kind of like a more rounded, bubbly version of the bullet chart. So we're just going to take this bullet chart and just paste that in here. And it really is just a more nice round version. So inside of the lines, if you go to like the past year and the current year, you can see that you can change the size, not the lines. Sorry, for the markers, you can change the size of the markers. Let's make them both size 4. And then we're going to go to the error bars and we're going to turn on the markers here and make the bars wider. So if we make the bars a size 10, let's make that a little bit bigger so you can see what's happening. So in the error bars, we've made that a size 10, and the marker will make that, it's like green, and the border color, we're going to change to this green as well. And you can kind of see it is sort of working, but it's not necessarily perfect, right? Because right now it's only showing like around here. Size for this should really not be 10, maybe 6 or something. Okay, a 7. And now that's encapsulating on that one side. But you can also see that the negative delta current year, because it's only giving the one upper bound, we need to give it the lower bound as well. So negative delta current year, negative delta past year, and then now it's encapsulating everything inside this, like kind of bar. And we do that here, delta past year, delta current year. Make this a size 10, border a size 2, that a blue, 7 or something. And there you have it. Nice, it's like still essentially a bullet chart, but just different UI. I do like that it's a little bit more rounded. Okay. The next one here is going to be this. And this is essentially just a little bit more of the same, to be honest. So, it's like, I'm not even going to lie. I'm going to take this one here, and we're going to copy this and paste this here. And you'll remember this is the one with the 2 zeros. And realistically, to make them look like this, the way that it looks here is very, very straightforward. The only thing that we really need to do is mess with the error bars a little bit. So here you can see that the markers are, it's like a circle. Instead of that, we can just make that into a dash, and make the dash, it's like if you make it a size 10, maybe that'll be too, but we want to make the width as large as possible. So we make the width a size 10 for the bar. We make the border size a size 2, and you can see that doing things makes it look slightly different, but we're just going to make the border color the same, and then we just remove the size, lower it until it fits perfectly. And it's like you can play around with this, but you can also just turn the markers off, and that will make it just like a nice flat bar that's floating in space. Another way you can do this is that you can just basically add the overlap and then find out which value is less, the current value or the past year value, and then make that it's like bar just white, and on top of that, or behind that, make the green and the blue bars. But I think using error bars is um, completely okay in this circumstance. So we'll take the marker off, make it a width size 10. You can see that I'm putting the width to size 10. It's because you can't make it bigger than size 10, so you have to do that, and then make the border size 2. And that's just a floating bar chart with error bars, which is completely fine by me. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a tornado chart. Now, a tornado chart, or a butterfly chart, as some people call it, is very, very, it's like easy to do, but it kind of shows past year versus current year. And maybe let's start with this one. It also essentially is just a clustered bar chart. And the way that we're going to do it is we, again, are going to be using month number. But for the tornado bar, we're going to have 3 different values. The tornado label bar, which is basically going to be, it's like taking the maximum value of the past year and then multiplying that by 1.2. You need to remove the filters of date number to get this working, since the y-axis is the month number. We're going to take the tornado negative past year so that it, angles towards the left. And then we're going to have the current year, just the regular current year, to be the positive. That's basically it. So the current year we're going to make black, the past year we're going to make gray, and the label bar we're just going to make transparent. Once we go to the data labels, we want to turn the data labels off for these 2 different items here. And then for the label itself, for the tornado label bar, we're going to, of course, make that into our month letter. And that is essentially going to work the same way as, it's like these horizontal dumbbell charts. And it works really nicely. But one thing that you want to be careful of is that if you are, it's like a little bit too tight with your space, you might want to add some padding. You might want to add some padding to specifically, it's like this side here, make it like 20 or something, so that this visual moves a little bit. It kind of does work, but tornado charts isn't really how I'd show this data in the first place. They definitely have their uses, but you want to be a bit more careful. You can also see that this, it's like value seems to be moving around a little bit. That's okay. The data label, the position needs to be inside base. Is it inside base? Outside end? No, it should be outside end here, and then it pushes it to the side, right? But, it's like, as you can see, like, if it moves around a little bit too much, it does try to justify the space by itself automatically. So you can see that it, as an x-axis, it might move around a little bit too much for you to be comfortable with. Like, even for me, I'm not super happy with the way that looks. I mean, it works, but it doesn't. I'd like it to be, it's like 0 centered every single time. And you can, of course, get there if you set the x-axis and the y-axis to be like a specific value. Like, you could have like the tornado label bar on both sides, and you could just figure out what's larger, the maximum of the past year or the maximum of the current year. Those are a couple of additional steps that you can take, but for the purposes of this video, I did not go that far. And that is it. This is a lot of different KPIs that are all one visual each, and this will be able to give you a lot of help in making nice, easy KPI cards. You can see that all of them take, it's like just a couple of minutes to make, as long as you have the measures. So go grab that starter file, it's like get started with these measures, and I hope this helps you out. If you're interested in learning how to make these with SVGs, so that you can actually, it's like make something like this. One thing that I do want to highlight that you can learn from the classroom is how to make C# macros like this, where you'll essentially just be able to run a specific macro. And what that's going to do is you're going to be able to select the measures that you want to see in your SVG, like your current year and your past year, for example. Check the actual, it's like table that the data is going to come from, and you'll see as easy as that, I've created a measure that's essentially going to be showing you what is your current year versus past year inside of an SVG. Easy as that. And there are basically 18 other macros which are basically coming right out of the box. So please check out my classroom where I do go into how to actually make all of these different visuals. And it's like we go into how we can actually make all of the visuals using ChatGPT, using it's like different prompts to make all of these different scripts. And hopefully that's something that will interest you as well. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something today. Take care.